My name is Lauren James. I am 82 years old, and until last winter, I believed I had already survived the worst nights of my life. I live in a quiet little town called Briar Glen, tucked between cornfields and old maple trees in the middle of Ohio. My house is small, white paint peeling off the porch railings, a wind chime that sings when the air moves just right. I bought this house with my late husband, Howard, 47 years ago. We raised 2 sons here. We buried one of them from this very living room. People think when you get old, life slows down. They think drama belongs to the young. They are wrong. Because one night at 2 a.m. someone knocked on my door. And he asked for something I never expected. But before I tell you what he said, let me say something to you. If you love stories about strength, about grandmothers who refuse to be pushed aside, about quiet women who surprise everyone, then you are in the right place. Please take a moment to subscribe, like this video, and turn on your notifications so you never miss a story like this. These stories matter. They remind us that no matter your age, your life still has power. And tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Are you in Texas, Maine, California, Georgia? I read every single one. I want to know who is sitting with me tonight. Now let me take you back to that knock. It was January, the kind of cold that creeps into your bones and stays there. The heater was humming softly in the hallway. I had fallen asleep in my recliner, wrapped in a quilt my sister made before she passed. Then came the knock. 3 slow taps. Not loud, not urgent, just steady. First I thought I was dreaming. No one visits an 82-year-old widow at 2 in the morning. Not unless something is wrong. The knock came again. I forced myself up, my knees protesting like always. I reached for the lamp and turned it on. The living room glowed a soft yellow. My heart was already racing. I walked to the front window and gently pulled the curtain aside. There he was, standing on my porch. Ezekiel Boone. My grandson. 34 years old. Broad shoulders. Dark hair falling into his eyes just like his father used to wear it. But something about him looked different that night. His jacket was thin for the weather. His hands were shoved into his pockets. His jaw tight. I had not seen Ezekiel in almost a year. Not since the argument. Not since he told me I was too old to understand how the world works now. Not since he tried to convince me to sell this house and move into a retirement facility so he could help manage my money. My pension. My savings. The insurance money Howard left me. I opened the door just a crack. Zeke, I whispered. It is 2 in the morning. He did not smile. Grandma, he said, his breath fogging in the air. I need to come in. There was something in his voice. Not anger. Not exactly fear either. Desperation. I stepped aside. The cold rushed in with him. He stomped his boots lightly and closed the door behind him. For a moment neither of us spoke. He looked around the house like he had not been here in years. The old wooden clock. The family pictures. The smell of lemon cleaner and lavender. You still keep it the same, he said quietly. It is my house, I replied. He nodded. Then he said it. Grandma, I need you to sign something. I felt my stomach tighten. Sign what? He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded envelope. Official looking. It is just paperwork, he said. Nothing complicated. I just need your signature tonight. Tonight. 2 in the morning. I stared at him. The boy I once rocked to sleep. The child who used to run through this living room in superhero pajamas. The teenager who stopped visiting once he got married. What kind of paperwork cannot wait until morning, Zeke? He looked at me then. Really looked at me. If you do not sign this, he said slowly, I could lose everything. I could hear the clock ticking behind us. Lose what? He hesitated. My house. My business. Everything. My mind raced. Zeke had started some online investment company 2 years ago. He had bragged about it at Thanksgiving once. Said he was finally going to be richer than anyone in the family. I never asked for details. Why do you need me to sign? Yes. Because he said, his voice dropping lower, I put your name on something. The room seemed to shrink. What do you mean you put my name on something? He ran his hand through his hair. Grandma, please. I did not mean for it to go this far. I just needed collateral. The bank would not approve the expansion without a cosigner. You were the only one with strong credit and assets. My ears rang. He used my name. I was going to tell you, he rushed. But then the market dipped. Then the investors pulled out. And now the bank is demanding full repayment by the end of the week. Felt my legs weaken. I reached for the arm of the couch. How much? He swallowed. $380,000. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because sometimes when the truth is too heavy, laughter is the only thing that comes out. That is almost everything I have, I whispered. He stepped closer. Grandma, if you sign this refinance agreement, they can restructure it. They will put a lien on your house temporarily. I just need time to fix things. Once my next deal closes, I will pay it all back. Lien. My house. The house Howard built with his own hands. The house where I held my dying son. The house where I planned to take my last breath. You forged my signature, I said quietly. He looked away. I just adjusted it. That is when I realized something. This was not a desperate boy asking for help. This was a man who had already decided my life was collateral. The clock ticked. Outside, the wind howled against the windows. And then he said the words that made my blood run cold. Grandma, if you do not sign, they can press charges. For fraud. Your name is on the original documents. It looks like you approved everything. I stared at him. Are you threatening me? I am trying to protect us both. He placed the papers on my coffee table and slid a pen toward me. Please, to sign. I looked down at the papers. Pages of legal language. My name printed in bold letters. Lauren James. 82 years old. Widow. Collateral. And in that moment something inside me shifted. I slowly lifted my eyes to meet his. And I said 5 words that he never expected to hear from me. Get out of my house. His face changed. Grandma, do not be stubborn. Get out. You do not understand what you are doing. Oh, I understand perfectly. The wind rattled the windows harder. He grabbed the papers again, frustration rising. If you do not help me, you will regret this. I walked to the door and opened it wide. The cold air rushed in like truth itself. Leave. He stood there for a long moment. Then he stepped outside. Before walking down the porch steps, he turned back and said something that made my heart stop. They are coming here tomorrow. And when they do, you will wish you had signed tonight. He walked into the darkness. I stood in my doorway, the cold biting at my skin, watching his shadow disappear. They are coming here tomorrow. Who was they? The bank? The police? Or someone worse? I closed the door slowly. And for the first time in 82 years, I realized that the greatest threat to my home was not time. It was blood. The morning after. I did not sleep that night. After Ezekiel left, the house felt different. Not empty. Not quiet. Just watch. I locked every door. I checked every window twice. Then I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee I did not drink. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual, like it was counting down to something I could not see. They are coming here tomorrow. His words echoed in my head. By 6 in the morning the sky was pale gray. Frost covered the yard like powdered sugar. I wrapped my coat around me and stepped out onto the porch. The air was sharp, clean. It felt almost cruel that the world could look so peaceful when mine was shaking. I had always been careful with money. Howard and I worked for everything we had. He drove trucks for 20 years. I worked part-time at the Briar Glen Public Library until my hands began to ache from arthritis. We saved slowly. We never gambled. We never borrowed more than we could repay. So how could my name be tied to $380,000? I went back inside and pulled out the old metal file box from the hallway closet. Every document I owned was inside. Insurance papers, property deeds, pension records, my will. I opened it on the dining table. There it was. A copy of a business guarantee agreement dated 18 months ago. My name printed neatly on the second page. And a signature that looked like mine. But it was not mine. I traced the ink with my finger. The loop in the L was too sharp. The J in James was rushed. He had practiced it. My chest tightened. Ezekiel used to sit at this same table doing homework while I baked peach cobbler. He used to call me his safe place. When did I become his backup plan? At 9 in the morning, my neighbor Delphine Crowder knocked on my door. Delphine is 76, sharp as a tack, and never misses anything that happens on our street. "You look pale, Lauren," she said, stepping inside without waiting to be invited. "What happened?" I hesitated. Pride is a heavy thing, especially at my age. But fear is heavier. I told her everything. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "That boy always had charm," she said. "But charm without discipline is dangerous." "What do I do?" I asked. She stared at me for a moment. "You call a lawyer." I had never needed one before. The idea made my stomach twist. Lawyers meant conflict, courtrooms, public shame. But Delphine was right. By 10:30, I was sitting in a small office downtown across from a man named Conrad Bellamy, mid-50s, silver hair, kind eyes behind square glasses. He listened without interrupting as I explained. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Mrs. James," he said gently, "this is identity fraud. If what you are saying is true, your grandson committed a felony." The word hit me like ice water. Felony. He continued, "You are not responsible for debts incurred under a forged signature. But we must act quickly." He asked for copies of everything. I handed over the documents with shaking hands. "Will they come to my house?" "Yes." "Possibly," he said. "Banks often send representatives before initiating legal action." "Legal action? Against me?" He folded his hands on the desk. "You have two choices. Protect your grandson or protect yourself." Closed my eyes. Blood or survival? When I opened them, my voice surprised even me. "Protect me." He nodded once. But as I left his office, my phone buzzed. Text from Ezekiel. "Have you signed?" I did not respond. At exactly 1 in the afternoon, a black SUV pulled into my driveway. My heart began to pound. I stood behind the curtain and watched two men step out. Dark coats, leather folders tucked under their arms. I felt smaller than I had in years. There is something about authority that shrinks old women. We are taught to be polite, to apologize, to comply. But I remembered Howard's voice in my mind. Never let anyone scare you out of what is yours. The doorbell rang. I opened the door halfway. "Mrs. Lauren James?" One man asked. "We are representatives from Northern Valley Financial. We need to discuss an outstanding obligation attached to your property." My hands were steady now. "I am aware of the issue," I said. "My attorney is handling it." The men exchanged a glance. "Attorney?" "Conrad Bellamy. You may contact his office directly." Their tone shifted almost instantly. "We were not aware you had retained counsel," the second man said. "Now you are." They handed me a business card and informed me that formal proceedings would pause pending investigation. When they left, I shut the door slowly. My legs trembled, but I did not fall. 2 hours later, Ezekiel's truck screeched into my driveway. He stormed to the porch and banged on the door. "Grandma." I did not rush this time. I walked calmly. When I opened it, his face was red with anger. "You hired a lawyer." His jaw clenched. "You are ruining everything." "No, Ezekiel. You already did that." He stepped closer. "Do you have any idea what will happen to me if this comes out?" "Yes," I said quietly. "Do." His eyes flickered. "I never meant to hurt you. But you did." He looked past me into the house. "You would really send your own grandson to prison?" The word hung between us. I thought of him at 5 years old, asleep on my chest. I thought of my son, his father, who worked double shifts so Ezekiel could go to college. And then I thought of the papers on my table. "You sent yourself there," I said softly. His expression cracked for a moment, then hardened. "If I go down, you go down with me. Your name is on everything." I straightened my shoulders. "Not anymore." His eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means I am not as helpless as you think." He stared at me, confused. For the first time since he arrived the night before, I saw uncertainty in him. There was something he did not know. Something I had not told him. Because 18 months ago, when he first brought me papers to sign for a small, temporary guarantee, I had done something very different than what he expected. And tomorrow morning, the truth about those papers would finally come out. I looked him in the eye. You should have read the fine print, Ezekiel. His face drained of color. What fine print? I closed the door gently between us. And inside I finally allowed myself to smile. Because the boy who thought he had trapped his grandmother was about to discover something. I had been preparing for this much longer than he realized. When the door closed between us, I leaned my back against it and let out a slow breath. Outside I could hear Ezekiel pacing on the porch. His boots scraped against the wooden boards Howard had nailed down with his own hands. The same porch where Zeke once carved his initials into the railing with a pocket knife. He thought he was clever. He forgot who taught him how to read contracts. 18 months ago, when he first came to me with what he called a small opportunity, I had been sitting in this very living room. He wore a bright smile that day. Too bright. He talked fast about digital assets, scaling capital, leveraged returns. Words that sounded impressive but felt slippery. Grandma, he had said back then, I just need a temporary cosign. It is only to satisfy the bank's requirement. You will not be responsible for anything. I remember looking at him carefully. I may be 82, I told him that day, but I am not foolish. He laughed. Course not. But I did not sign that first document right away. Instead, I drove to the one place in town where people still believe in reading before trusting. The Briar Glen Public Library. I used to work there. I still have friends on the board. And tucked in the back corner of that quiet building is a free legal aid clinic that visits twice a month. Mostly they help single mothers and elderly widows with landlord disputes or medical bills. That is where I met a young attorney named Camille Rutherford. She had sharp eyes and a calm voice. She reviewed the documents Ezekiel wanted me to sign. After 10 minutes, she looked up at me and said something I will never forget. Mrs. James, this is not a simple cosign. This makes you personally liable if his company fails. And there is no asset protection clause. Meaning if he defaults, they can come after your house. I remember feeling my heart sink that day. Why would he hide that? I had whispered. Camille did not answer. She just folded the papers neatly. You have options, she said. And that is when the plan began. Back in the present, Ezekiel was still outside my door. Grandma, open up. He shouted. I did not. Instead, I walked to my kitchen table and picked up my phone. I dialed Conrad Bellamy. It is time, I told him. He understood immediately. But I have already contacted Camille Rutherford. She still has the file. Ezekiel's pounding stopped. I heard his truck engine roar to life. Tires spun against gravel as he sped away. He was scared now. Because what he did not know was this. The document I eventually signed 18 months ago was not the one he brought me. Camille had drafted a modified agreement. One that included a conditional authorization clause. It stated clearly that any financial action taken in my name without my direct notarized approval would be considered fraud. It also required that all official communications from the bank be sent directly to my attorney of record. Ezekiel never read it carefully. He saw my signature and assumed victory. He did not realize the contract protected me more than him. The following morning I dressed carefully. Navy blue cardigan. Pearl earrings Howard gave me on our 40th anniversary. If I was going to face consequences, I would do it with dignity. At 10 o'clock, Conrad and Camille arrived at my house together. Camille looked older than I remembered. More confident. She carried a leather briefcase and a calm smile. You did exactly what we discussed, she said. He nodded. Conrad spread the documents across my dining table. Northern Valley Financial had already received notice of the protective clause. They were investigating irregularities in the signature trail. Several documents Ezekiel submitted lacked proper notarization. That is where he made his fatal mistake. He forged my name more than once. and the bank's internal compliance team had flagged inconsistencies. "This is going to escalate quickly," Conrad said gently. My chest tightened again. "Will he be arrested?" "Possibly. Or he may be offered a settlement agreement if he cooperates." Cooperates? That meant telling the truth. An hour later my phone rang. "Ezekiel." I let it go to voicemail. Then another call. And another. Finally a text appeared. "They are freezing everything." Good, I thought. By afternoon 2 uniformed officers knocked on my door. Not for me. For information. They were polite. Professional. They asked if I had authorized specific transactions tied to a business expansion loan. I answered calmly. "No, officers. I did not." They took notes. They thanked me. As they left I felt something strange. Not triumph. Relief. But the story was not finished. Because that evening, just as the sun dipped behind the cornfields, a silver sedan pulled into my driveway. A woman stepped out. Elegant. Late 20s. Marlo Boone. Ezekiel's wife. I had only met her twice. Both times she barely spoke to me. Tonight her eyes were red. She walked to my porch slowly. "Mrs. James," she said softly when I opened the door. "We need to talk." There was no anger in her voice. Only fear. I stepped aside and let her in. She stood in the living room, looking around the house like she was seeing it for the first time. "I did not know," she whispered. "Know what?" "About the forged signatures. About the loans. He told me you agreed." I studied her carefully. "Did you believe him?" She hesitated. "I wanted to." Tears slid down her cheeks. "They are talking about charges. Prison time. He says you set him up." I almost laughed. Set him up. I protected myself. She clasped her hands together. "If he goes to prison, everything collapses. We just had a baby, Mrs. James. Little Rowan is only 6 months old." Baby. I felt the air leave my lungs. A great-grandchild I had never met. "Why did he not tell me?" I asked quietly. She looked away. "He said you would judge us." I walked to the window and stared at the fading light. So many lies layered on top of each other. Behind me, Marlo's voice trembled. "Is there any way you can withdraw the complaint?" Turn slowly. I did not file a complaint. The bank did. She stared at me, confused. But I knew something she did not. Because earlier that afternoon, Conrad had informed me of one more detail. There was a silent partner in Ezekiel's company. An investor. And that investor had already begun cooperating with federal investigators. This was bigger than just my house. Much bigger. I looked at Marlo gently. "Your husband is not only in trouble because of me." Her face went pale. "What are you saying?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed again. A new message from an unknown number. It contained only one sentence. "If you testify, Mrs. James, you will regret it." I felt a chill move through me. This was no longer about family betrayal. This was about something dangerous. And suddenly, I understood why Ezekiel had come at 2 a.m. He was not just desperate. He was afraid. The message stayed on my phone screen long after Marlo left. "If you testify, Mrs. James, you will regret it." No name. No number I recognized. Just a warning. At 82 I have learned something about fear. Does not always shout. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it waits in the corner and studies you. That night, fear sat across from me at the kitchen table. But I did not run. The next morning Conrad called early. "Mrs. James," he said, his tone more serious than before, "this case has moved beyond a simple loan default. Federal investigators are now involved. The investment firm Ezekiel partnered with is under investigation for securities fraud." Securities fraud. Those words felt heavy. Bigger than Briar Glen. Bigger than my little house. Was he part of that? Yes. It appears his company was used to move funds through inflated asset reports. Whether he understood the full scope, we do not know yet. Understood. I thought about my grandson's face when he stood on my porch at 2 a.m. The way his confidence cracked for just a second. Maybe he knew more than he claimed. Or maybe he was drowning and too proud to admit he could not swim. Later that afternoon I did something unexpected. I drove to see him. The Boone house sat at the edge of town in a newer subdivision. Big windows, fresh paint, a driveway too large for the neighborhood. I had only visited once, for a Thanksgiving dinner where conversation felt forced and rushed. When I pulled in, Ezekiel was sitting on the front steps. His elbows rested on his knees. His phone lay beside him. He looked tired. Not angry, just worn down. He saw my car and stood quickly. "Grandma, why are you here?" "Because this is not how family ends," I said. He looked at me carefully like he was trying to read my mind. "Did you call the authorities?" he asked. "Well." He exhaled slowly. "Then why are they digging through everything?" "Because, Ezekiel, when you build something on lies, eventually the ground gives way." We stood there in silence. Finally he said, "I never meant for you to get pulled into this. You pulled me in the moment you forged my name." He flinched. "You do not understand the pressure I was under." "Then help me understand." He sat back down. I joined him on the steps, the cold concrete seeping through my coat. "The investor," he said quietly, "his name is Victor Hale. He promised quick capital, fast expansion, said we could double the business in a year. And when returns slowed, he suggested adjusting reports. Just temporarily. To attract more backing. Adjusting reports. That means lying." Ezekiel rubbed his face with his hands. "It was supposed to be temporary. Temporary lies become permanent crimes," I said. He looked at me then, really looked at me like he was seeing me as more than an old woman in a cardigan. "I thought I could fix it before anyone noticed," he whispered. "But Victor started moving money without telling me. When the bank began asking questions, he said the only way to secure emergency refinancing was to leverage additional assets." "My assets?" He nodded slowly. "He said family backing would calm the lenders." "Did you tell him you forged my signature?" "Well." He assumed you agreed." I felt a wave of sadness, deeper than anger. "You were willing to risk my home to impress a man like that?" His voice cracked. "I was trying to build something big. Something that mattered." "Your grandfather built something big," I said softly. "It was called integrity." Tears filled his eyes. "They want me to testify against Victor," he admitted. "That is why the threat started." "The message." My heart pounded. "You received one too." "Yes." He looked ashamed. "I should have protected you. You should have protected your own name." He swallowed hard. "If I cooperate, I could avoid prison. But Victor will not go quietly. And if you do not cooperate, they will bury me with him." We sat there as a cold wind moved through the neighborhood. Then I told him something I had never shared before. "When your father was 25, I said, he lost nearly everything in a failed farming investment. He came to me terrified. Shame. But he told the truth. We worked through it together. No lies. No shortcuts." "Why did you never tell me that?" Ezekiel asked. "'Cause he learned from it. He rebuilt. And he wanted you to see him as strong, not broken." Ezekiel stared at the ground. "I was afraid you would see me as broken." I reached for his hand. "Being broken is not the worst thing. Being dishonest is." He squeezed my hand tightly. "What should I do?" For the first time since this began, he was asking instead of demanding. "You tell the truth," I said. "All of it. And you." "I will do the same." His eyes widened slightly. "You would testify. If necessary. Even if it means exposing me." I nodded slowly. "I will not lie for you. But I will stand beside you if you choose honesty." Tears slid down his face openly now. "I'm so sorry, Grandma. Sorry does not fix everything. But it is a beginning." Just then, Marlo opened the front door, holding a small bundle in her arms. "Rowan. My great-grandchild." She hesitated, then walked toward us. "Do you want to hold him?" she asked softly. I stood carefully and reached out. Rowan was tiny, warm. His breath soft against my neck. He smelled like milk and baby powder. In that moment, something inside me shifted again. This was not just about protecting my house anymore. It was about protecting the future. Victor Hale thought he could scare an old woman into silence. He underestimated me. But he also underestimated something else. Family does not always protect you from consequences. Sometimes it pushes you toward them. As I handed Rowan back to Marlowe, my phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. Court date confirmed. We will be watching. I lifted my chin. Let them watch. Because for the first time since that knock at 2 in the morning, I was no longer afraid. I was ready. And Victor Hale was about to learn that the quietest person in the room is sometimes the strongest. The courthouse in Briar Glen is small. Red brick. White columns in front. The kind of building that looks harmless from the outside. But inside lives change forever. The morning of the preliminary hearing, the sky was clear. Too clear. I always find it strange how the sun shines brightest on the hardest days. I dressed carefully again. Cream blouse. Navy skirt. Low heels I only wear to church or funerals. In a way this felt like both. Ezekiel met me outside the courthouse steps. He looked thinner already. Stress had carved lines into his young face. You do not have to come in with me, he said quietly. Yes, I do. He hesitated. Are you angry with me? I considered the question. It was. But anger is heavy. I am too old to carry unnecessary weight. I am disappointed, I answered honestly. But I am not your enemy. Inside, the air smelled like old paper and polished wood. People whispered in low voices. A few reporters from nearby towns stood along the hallway, holding notepads. Word had spread. A local entrepreneur tied to a federal fraud investigation makes small-town news quickly. And then I saw him. Victor Hale. Impeccable gray suit. Silver cufflinks. A calm expression that did not match the tension in the room. He looked like a man used to winning. When his eyes met mine, something cold passed between us. He smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who thinks he still has control. We took our seats. The prosecutor laid out the preliminary evidence. Inflated financial statements. Shell transfers. Forged signatures. Emails that painted a picture of calculated deception. Victor's attorney argued that Ezekiel had acted independently. That he was the architect of the scheme. I felt Ezekiel stiffen beside me. Then my name was called. Lauren James. 82 years old. Widow. Grandmother. I walked to the witness stand slowly, but steadily. The courtroom was quiet. Every eye on me. Do you swear to tell the truth? Do. The prosecutor asked simple questions first. Did I authorize the loan? Did I sign the documents? Did I receive financial benefit from the transactions? No. Then she asked something deeper. Mrs. James, when you discovered your signature had been forged, what did you do? I told the truth. Why? Because silence would have made me complicit. The room stayed quiet. Victor's attorney stood for cross-examination. Mrs. James, he said smoothly. Is it true you were aware your grandson was seeking investors? Yes. And you never objected? Well. So you supported his business ventures? I supported his honesty, I replied. A slight ripple moved through the courtroom. He changed tactics. At your age, memory can sometimes be unreliable. Are you certain you did not sign those documents willingly and later forget? I looked directly at him. Young man, I may forget where I put my glasses. I do not forget risking my home. A few quiet chuckles rose from the back. Victor shifted slightly in his seat. The prosecutor then presented the modified agreement Camille had drafted 18 months earlier. The protective clause. The notarized verification requirements. The courtroom murmured. Victor's calm mask cracked for just a second. Because that clause made one thing very clear. Someone had knowingly bypassed safeguards. And it was not me. After my testimony, I stepped down carefully. Ezekiel's eyes were filled with emotion. Not anger this time. Respect. The hearing continued for hours. Financial experts testified. Email threads were read aloud. Messages where Victor instructed Ezekiel to delay reporting losses. To restructure narratives. to temporarily adjust exposure. Temporary lies. By late afternoon, the judge announced that sufficient evidence existed to move the case to federal court. Victor's face hardened. As we exited the courtroom, reporters rushed forward. "Mrs. James, how does it feel to testify against your own grandson?" I stopped walking. "I am not against my grandson," I said calmly. "I am against dishonesty." And then I walked away. Outside, the autumn wind carried the scent of fallen leaves. Ezekiel stood beside me quietly. "I did not know you were that strong," he admitted. "Neither did I." Marlowe approached, holding Rowan. She smiled faintly. The prosecutor spoke with Ezekiel privately near the steps. I watched from a distance. After a few minutes he returned. "They offered a deal," he said. My heart tightened. "If I fully cooperate and testify against Victor, I avoid prison, probation, financial penalties, community service. And if you refuse, minimum 5 years." I looked at him steadily. "What are you going to do?" He looked down at his son. "I am done protecting men who use me," he said quietly. That evening, as I sat back in my living room, I felt something shift in the air. The house no longer felt threatened. It felt grounded. But just as I began to breathe easier, the phone rang. Unknown number again. I answered this time. A deep voice spoke calmly. "Mrs. James, you are making a mistake." I said nothing. "You think this ends in a courtroom?" "Does not." The line went dead. I stared at the receiver in my hand. Victor was not finished. And something told me he was about to make one final, desperate move. Because powerful men do not fall quietly. They drag others down with them. And I had just become his biggest obstacle. The call ended, but the silence it left behind felt louder than any threat. I set the phone down slowly and walked through my house, turning off lights one by one. I told myself it was just fear trying to grow teeth. I told myself I had lived through worse things than a powerful man's pride. But that night I did not sleep deeply. Around 1:47 a.m., I woke to a strange smell. Dark, bitter, smoke. First I thought it was my imagination. Then I heard it. Faint crackling sound. My heart slammed against my ribs. I pushed myself up from bed and shuffled toward the hallway. The air felt thicker already. A thin gray haze crept along the ceiling. Oh Lord! I moved faster than I had in years. When I reached the kitchen I saw it. Flames licking up the back wall near the porch door. The curtains were on fire. For a second I froze. 82 years old. Alone. Fire spreading. "This is how it ends," a voice whispered in my head. No, I answered it. Not tonight. I grabbed the fire extinguisher from beneath the sink. Howard insisted we keep one there decades ago. I remember teasing him about being overly cautious. Bless that man. My hands shook as I pulled the pin and aimed. The white spray shot out, hitting the base of the flames. The fire sputtered, then flared again. Too fast. I backed away and grabbed my phone. 911, what is your emergency? My house is on fire. Even as I said it, my eyes scanned the room. The flames were climbing the wall. Smoke thickened, stinging my eyes. Can you exit safely? The dispatcher asked. I hurried to the front door, but before stepping out I turned back. 47 years of memories lived inside these walls. Howard's laugh. My children's footsteps. Christmas mornings. Grief. Healing. I was not leaving without fighting. I rushed back to the kitchen, spraying the extinguisher again. This time I aimed lower. The flames shrank slightly. Sirens wailed in the distance. Come on, Lauren, I muttered to myself. The back door glass was shattered. That is when I understood. This was no accident. Someone had thrown something. Gasoline. My chest tightened. The extinguisher ran out. Smoke thickened rapidly. I stumbled toward the front door just as firefighters pulled into the driveway. 2 of them rushed inside with heavy hoses. Water blasted against the kitchen wall. Within minutes, the flames were under control. I stood barefoot on my lawn, wrapped in a blanket a neighbor had thrown around my shoulders. Delphine was there, her arm around me. Who would do this? She whispered. Already knew. But I said nothing. An officer approached gently. Mrs. James, it appears someone deliberately ignited the exterior of your home. We found traces of accelerant near the porch. My house had survived storms. No. Now it bore black scars along the siding. You were lucky, the officer continued. Another 10 minutes and it could have been catastrophic. Lucky. I watched firefighters move through the smoke-filled kitchen. Victor Hale thought fear would silence me. Instead, he had made something very clear. He was desperate. And desperate men make mistakes. The next morning, the story was everywhere. Local news stations stood outside my home. Headlines read, "Elderly woman targeted amid federal fraud case." Conrad called immediately. "This changes everything," he said. "Federal prosecutors will consider this witness intimidation." "Good," I replied. He paused. "Are you afraid?" I looked at the charred edge of my kitchen wall. I was last night. And now? Now I am angry. By afternoon, investigators had security footage from a neighbor's camera across the street. Dark SUV. Late model. Partial license plate visible. Victor Hale owned a vehicle matching the description. But here is what Victor did not know. Briar Glen may be small, but small towns remember faces. By evening, a gas station clerk identified the same SUV purchasing gasoline in a portable container just hours before the fire. And the security footage showed something even more important. Victor was not alone. Ezekiel saw the footage at the prosecutor's office. He called me immediately. "Grandma, I did not know." "Swear." "Believe you." He exhaled shakily. "He came to my house earlier that night. He wanted me to back out of the deal. I refused. He said things would get worse." "Did he threaten you?" "Not directly. But his eyes did." The next day, federal agents arrested Victor Hale on additional charges of witness intimidation and attempted arson. When I saw his mugshot on the evening news, I did not feel joy. Felt vindication. But the story was not finished yet. Because in court 2 weeks later, Victor did something none of us expected. He requested a private meeting with me. The prosecutor strongly advised against it. "He has nothing to offer you but manipulation," she warned. Still, I surprised myself. I agreed. Not because I trusted him, but because I wanted to look into the eyes of the man who tried to burn my life down. The meeting took place in a guarded room at the federal building. Victor entered in handcuffs. No suit. No cufflinks. No smooth smile. Just a man stripped of power. "Mrs. James," he began calmly, "I underestimated you." "Yes, you did." He studied me carefully. "You could end this more easily than you think." I raised an eyebrow. "How?" "Withdraw your cooperation. Publicly state you misunderstood. The case weakens significantly." I almost laughed. "You burned my house." "Allegedly," he corrected smoothly. I leaned forward slightly. "Let me tell you something, Mr. Hale." He waited. "You see an old woman and assume fragility. But I have buried a child. I have buried a husband. I have survived loneliness that would crush most men. Do you think fire scares me?" His jaw tightened. "You are making an enemy of powerful people." I shook my head. "Well, you did that yourself." For the first time I saw something in his eyes. Not anger. Fear. Because he finally understood. I was not a weak witness. I was immovable. As guards escorted him out, he turned once more. "This is not over," he said. I watched him leave. "Oh, it is," I whispered. But I did not know yet that the real ending would not be in a courtroom. It would come from somewhere much closer to home. And it would change everything I thought I understood about strength. The kitchen still smelled faintly of smoke, even after the repairs began. Charred wood had been removed. Fresh drywall replaced what was damaged. But scars, even when patched, leave a memory behind. I sat at my dining table with a cup of chamomile tea, watching workers move in and out of my house. Insurance had covered most of the damage. Neighbors brought casseroles. Delphine refused to let me sleep alone for a week. Small towns close ranks when one of their own is attacked. But what I did not expect was the shift in how people looked at me. At the grocery store, strangers nodded with quiet respect. At church, Pastor Elridge called me courageous during Sunday service. Courageous. I did not feel courageous. Felt tired. The federal case moved quickly after Victor's arrest. With the arson charge and financial evidence mounting, his legal team began negotiating. Ezekiel had officially agreed to cooperate. The night before his formal deposition, he came to my house again. This time not at 2 a.m. Not desperate. Just quiet. We sat across from each other in the living room. The same room where he once asked me to sign away my security. "I am scared," he admitted. "You should be," I replied gently. He nodded. "Not of prison. Of facing what I did." I watched him carefully. "That is called growth." He gave a small, sad smile. "Marlo says I should thank you." "For what?" "For not protecting me from consequences." That surprised me. "She is stronger than I realized." He leaned forward. "I spent my whole life trying to prove I was successful. Bigger than Dad. Bigger than this town. I thought money meant respect. And now I would trade all of it for one clean conscience." Silence filled the room. Then he said something that made my heart ache. "Do you think Grandpa would be ashamed of me?" I closed my eyes briefly. Howard believed in second chances. But he also believed in owning your mistakes. I looked at Ezekiel. He would be disappointed. But he would not give up on you. Tears filled his eyes again. "I do not deserve that kind of grace." "None of us do," I said softly. The next day in federal court, Ezekiel testified. He detailed Victor's instructions. The manipulated numbers. The late-night strategy calls. The pressure tactics. When asked why he finally came forward, he surprised everyone. "Because my grandmother refused to lie for me," he said. "And she taught me better than that." I watched from the gallery. My heart felt heavy but steady. Victor sat rigidly at the defense table. His expression colder than ever. But his control was gone. 2 weeks later the verdict came. Guilty on multiple counts of securities fraud, conspiracy, and witness intimidation. The attempted arson charge carried the heaviest weight. Victor Hale would serve significant federal prison time. The courtroom buzzed with quiet satisfaction. But the real surprise came afterward. The prosecutor approached me privately. "Mrs. James, because of your testimony and the intimidation attempt, the court has authorized restitution from seized assets. You will receive financial compensation for damages and emotional distress." I blinked. Compensation. Substantial. I did not know what to say. Money had nearly destroyed my family. And now it was returning in a strange, poetic way. When the check arrived weeks later, I held it in my hands and stared at the number. It was more than the repair costs. Much more. That night I called Ezekiel and Marlo over. They sat at my kitchen table, nervous. I placed the check between us. "This came because of everything that happened." Ezekiel looked at it, then at me. "You deserve it." "Maybe. But money is a tool. And I have lived long enough to know tools can build or destroy." I slid the check toward him. "I am not giving you this to fix your business." His shoulders tensed. "Then why?" "Because you are going to use it to rebuild something else." He looked confused. "Your integrity." Marlo squeezed his hand. "What do you mean?" she asked. I smiled gently. "You're going back to school. Financial ethics. Compliance. Something that teaches you how systems should work, not how to bend them." Ezekiel stared at me like I had lost my mind. "At my age. After this scandal. Especially after this scandal." I leaned closer. "You will use your failure to help other young entrepreneurs avoid the same traps. You will speak honestly about what greed costs. You will become the warning you once ignored." Silence stretched across the table. Then, slowly, he nodded. "I do not deserve this chance." "Perhaps not," I said softly. "But Rowan deserves a father who chose redemption." Marlo's eyes filled with tears. That night, after they left, I sat alone in my quiet house. The walls were repaired. The threat was gone. But something inside me had changed too. I thought surviving meant holding on to what you have. Now I understand. Sometimes winning means transforming what tried to destroy you. I looked at Howard's photograph on the mantel. We did not just protect the house, I whispered. We protected the future. But there was still one more truth I had not yet revealed. A truth about that night at 2 a.m. Because the request Ezekiel made was not the most unexpected thing he brought to my door. There was something else. Something he slipped into my coat pocket when I walked him out that first night. And I had not opened it yet. For weeks I had almost forgotten about it. In the chaos of court dates, repairs, threats, and headlines, the small folded paper Ezekiel slipped into my coat pocket that first night had remained untouched. I found it again by accident. It was early spring. The air had softened. I was cleaning out my hallway closet, preparing to donate winter coats to the church drive. When I reached into the deep pocket of my navy wool coat, my fingers brushed against something stiff. I pulled it out slowly. A folded letter. My heart skipped. I sat down on the hallway bench and stared at it. The paper was worn at the edges. My name was written on the outside. Grandma. The handwriting was unmistakably Ezekiel's. Not rushed. Not desperate. Careful. I unfolded it. Grandma. If you are reading this, it means I did not have the courage to say these things out loud. The words blurred for a moment. I blinked and continued. I never meant for any of this to happen. I thought I was smarter than the risks. I thought I could control everything. When I put your name on those documents, I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I would fix it before you ever found out. But the truth is, I was afraid to disappoint you. You always believed I could be something good. I did not want to be small in your eyes. When I knocked on your door at 2 a.m., I was not just asking for a signature. I was asking you to save me from my own choices. If you refuse, I will understand. If you turn me in, I will deserve it. I only ask that one day, when Rowan is older, you tell him I was not always this foolish. Love you. The paper trembled in my hands. All that time, while he stood in my living room demanding my signature, this letter had been in his coat pocket. He must have slipped it into mine when I hugged him goodbye. Not manipulation. Not strategy. A confession he was too proud to speak. Tears slid down my cheeks quietly. I had seen his arrogance that night. I had missed his fear. That afternoon I drove to his house again. This time not because of crisis. Because of truth. Marlowe answered the door. Rowan was crawling across the living room floor. He is at class, she said with a small smile. Bless. Ezekiel had already enrolled in a graduate certification program at a nearby university. Financial compliance and regulatory ethics. Sounded boring. Sounded necessary. I held up the letter. He gave me this. Her expression softened. He wrote that before coming to your house that night. I found him sitting at the kitchen table crying afterward. Crying. He said he thought you would never speak to him again. I sat down slowly on their couch. I was angry, I admitted. But I was never done loving him. Marlowe nodded. He knows that now. That evening, when Ezekiel returned home, I was still there. He froze in the doorway. Grandma. I held up the letter. You thought I would not read this. His face flushed red. I forgot I gave you that. Well, you did not forget. You were hoping I would find it when I needed it most. He swallowed hard. Did you hate me? I shook my head. I was hurt. But hate is a poison. I have lived too long to drink it. He stepped closer. Why did you not tell me you had that letter? Because you needed to face the consequences without knowing I already understood your regret. Silence filled the room. Then he did something he had not done since he was a little boy. He hugged me. Not politely. Not briefly. He held on like someone who almost lost something irreplaceable. Closed my eyes. Strength does not always look like standing alone. Sometimes it looks like holding someone accountable and loving them anyway. Weeks passed. The scandal faded from headlines. Victor began serving his sentence. My house stood firm, repaired and stronger. One evening, The university invited Ezekiel to speak on a student ethics panel. He asked me to attend. I sat in the front row. He stood at the podium, hands steady. I made a decision driven by pride and fear, he told the room. I thought protecting my image mattered more than protecting my integrity. It nearly cost my grandmother her home and my son his future. The room was silent. The person who saved me was not someone who covered my mistakes. It was someone who refused to lie for me. His eyes met mine. My grandmother taught me that strength is quiet but immovable. I felt tears again. After the event, several young students approached him with questions. He answered honestly. No excuses, no exaggeration, just truth. As we walked back to the car, he looked at me. You know, he said softly, if you had signed that night, none of this would have happened. He nodded. And you would have learned nothing. He smiled faintly. You always did play the long game. I squeezed his arm. At 82 you learn patience. But even as peace settled back into our lives, one final decision remained. The restitution money still sat untouched in my account. And I had been thinking carefully about what it should become. Because money that arrives from pain should not sit idle. It should transform into something that protects others. And I knew exactly what that would be. The check from the Federal Restitution Fund had been sitting in my desk drawer for nearly 2 months. Every time I opened that drawer to pay a bill or file a receipt, I saw it. A reminder of everything that had happened. The forged signatures. The fire. The courtroom. Tears. Money born from damage. One quiet Sunday afternoon, I drove to the Briar Glen Public Library. The building had not changed much since I retired. Same brick walls. Same tall windows. Same smell of old books and lemon cleaner. I stood in the lobby for a moment, letting memories wash over me. This was where I first brought Ezekiel for story time. Where he learned to sound out words. Where he once whispered to me that he wanted to be important when he grew up. Important. The word means something different to me now. I found Camille Rutherford in the back office. She had been promoted since I last saw her there. Now she oversaw the free legal clinic program. Mrs. James, she said warmly. It is good to see you under calmer circumstances. Smiled. I hope to keep it that way. We sat down across from each other, just like we had 18 months earlier when she first warned me about that contract. I took the check out of my purse and placed it on her desk. I want to start something, I said. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. What kind of something? Fund. For seniors. For widows. For anyone in this town who does not understand the fine print. She leaned back interested. Tell me more. I thought about that night at 2 a.m. About how close I had come to signing everything away because someone I loved asked me to. There are too many people my age who trust first and read later, I said. And too many young people who think speed matters more than truth. Camille nodded slowly. You want education. I want protection, I replied. Workshops. Free legal reviews. Financial literacy classes. Not just for the elderly. For everyone. She studied the check again. This would cover the first few years easily. But I do not need the money. My pension is steady. My house is paid for. Howard made sure of that. But if this money sits in my account, it will only remind me of what almost happened. I want it to remind others of what can be prevented. 2 months later, the Lauren James Community Trust officially launched. I protested when they insisted on using my name. But the town council would not budge. Your story saved more than your house, one of them said. Changed how people think. The first workshop filled every chair in the library basement. Young couples, retirees, small business owners, even high school students. Ezekiel stood at the front beside Camille. He spoke first. I made mistakes because I did not understand how easily ambition can blur judgment, he told the room. If someone offers you quick success, slow down. I watched him carefully. There was no pride in his voice anymore. Only honesty. After he finished, I stepped forward. I am not here because I am brave, I said. I am here because I almost signed something I did not fully understand. The room grew quiet. When someone pressures you at 2 a.m, that is not urgency. That is manipulation. A few heads nodded. Questions. Read the fine print. And if someone makes you feel ashamed for protecting yourself, that is your first warning sign. After the workshop, people lined up to thank us. An elderly man admitted he had nearly co-signed a risky loan for his nephew. A young woman said she finally understood the importance of independent legal advice before starting her online business. And in that moment I realized something. The fire that tried to destroy my house had sparked something far more powerful. Awareness. Weeks turned into months. The trust expanded. We partnered with a regional credit union. We created printed guides written in simple language. We held seminars at churches and community centers. And every time I watched Ezekiel speak openly about his failure, I saw him becoming the man he once pretended to be. One evening, as we locked up after a workshop, he turned to me. "You know what surprises me most?" he said. "What?" "People respect me more now than they did when I was pretending to be successful." I smiled gently. "That is because truth is heavier than money." He nodded thoughtfully. Rowan had started walking by then. Little unsteady steps across the living room. Every time he toddled toward me with open arms, I felt something settle inside my chest. The future had not been burned. It had been protected. But there was one last thing I needed to do. One final closure. I drove to the federal prison where Victor Hale was serving his sentence. Not to forgive him. Not to argue. Just to finish what began. He agreed to a short meeting. When he entered the visitor's room, he looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but in presence. "Mrs. James," he said evenly. "Mr. Hale. Why are you here?" he asked. "To tell you something." He waited. "You tried to scare me into silence. You tried to burn my home. You thought I would choose fear over truth." He said nothing. "You failed." His jaw tightened slightly. "You ruined your own empire," I continued. "But I built something from the ashes." He looked confused. "Trust fund. Workshops. Education programs. Because of what you did, this town will be harder to exploit." For the first time I saw understanding cross his face. "You turned it into something useful," he murmured. "Understood. That is what strength does." As I walked out of that prison I felt no anger. No bitterness. Just completion. The night at 2 in the morning no longer haunted me. It had become a turning point. And now, only one chapter remained. My name is Lauren James. I am 82 years old. And the night someone knocked on my door at 2 in the morning, I thought my life was about to fall apart. I did not know it was about to begin again. A year has passed since that winter night. The porch has been repaired. Fresh white paint covers the railing. The wind chime still sings when the breeze moves just right. If you stand at the edge of my yard, you would never guess flames once crawled up those walls. But I remember. And I am grateful. Tonight I am sitting in my living room again. The same recliner. The same quilt. Only now, there is a small wooden plaque hanging near the hallway. Lauren James Community Trust. Protecting integrity, protecting homes. Sometimes I smile when I see it. Because the boy who once knocked on my door asking me to sign away everything now knocks on doors to help others read before they sign. Ezekiel completed his certification program. He now works with a regional compliance firm that audits small businesses. He speaks openly about his past. Not proudly. Not shamefully. Honestly. Marlo returned to her art. She paints landscapes now. Calm fields. Open skies. Rowan runs through their backyard without knowing how close his family came to losing everything. And me. I did not move to a retirement facility. I did not sell my house. I did not shrink myself to make anyone else comfortable. Instead, I found something at 82 that I did not expect. Purpose. Last week, during one of our trust workshops, a young man stayed behind after everyone else left. Early 20s. Nervous eyes. "My uncle wants me to co-sign a property deal," he said. "He says it is urgent." I smiled gently. "Is it urgent for you or for him?" He blinked. "Guess for him." "Then it is not urgent." He laughed softly. "You sound just like my grandmother." "I hope she sounds wise," I said. As he walked out, I realized something important. That night at 2 in the morning, when Ezekiel stood on my porch with those papers, I could have chosen the easy path. Could have signed. I could have told myself family comes first. But family does not mean sacrificing truth. Family does not mean surrendering your home. Family does not mean protecting someone from the consequences of their own actions. Real love stands firm. And sometimes the most powerful word an old woman can say is no. 2 evenings ago, Ezekiel came by again, this time at a decent hour. He brought Rowan, who is now almost walking confidently. The little boy waddled straight into my arms. "Grandma," Zeke said quietly while Rowan played with the wind chime string, "I never properly thanked you." "For what?" "For not giving up on me." I looked at him carefully. "I did not give up on you. I just refused to give up on myself." He nodded slowly. "That is what saved me." We stood on the porch as the sun dipped behind the cornfields. The sky turned gold and soft pink. For a moment the world felt still. "Do you ever regret not signing that night?" he asked. I thought about it honestly. If I had signed, I would have saved you from a courtroom. But I would have destroyed you in a different way. He swallowed. "No." I placed my hand on his shoulder. "Strength is not loud, Ezekiel. It is steady. And it protects what matters most." He smiled faintly. "You really are the strongest person I know." I laughed softly. "Do not let that go to my head." After he left, I sat back in my living room and thought about that first knock. I remember how small I felt when I opened the door. How fragile the world seemed. How close I came to believing I was powerless. But here is the truth. It does not weaken your voice. Experience sharpens it. Loss does not break you. Teaches you what cannot be taken. And fear. Fear only wins if you let it decide for you. That night I chose differently. I chose to protect my home. I chose to protect my name. And in doing so, I protected my grandson's future too. Because sometimes winning is not about revenge. It is about refusing to bend. If you have stayed with me through this story, I want you to remember something. When someone knocks on your door at 2 in the morning with urgency in their voice and papers in their hand, pause. Breathe. Read the fine print. And if your spirit tells you something is wrong, trust it. Your strength does not expire with age. Deepens. Thank you for sitting with me through this journey. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your notifications so you never miss another powerful story of resilience and redemption. And tell me in the comments where you are watching from. I would love to know which part of this country is listening tonight. Because no matter where you are, no matter how old you are, your story is not finished. Sometimes it is just waiting for a knock at the door.
This story belongs to Lawrence James, the grandma whose quiet courage inspired me and gave me the confidence to share our experience with you all.